Bonjour, habari za mchana. Hello, my name is Paul Curry. I'm a senior professional officer with ICLEI Africa and very thrilled to host you today for our webinar on food and the circular economy. Bienvenue à tous. Merci de votre participation. Pour écouter notre webinaire en français, veuillez cliquer en bas de votre écran sur l'onglet Interpretation et sélectionner le drapeau français. Interpretation. Before we begin, I would just like to remind everyone of our webinar protocols. The webinar will be recorded, and therefore by participating in the webinar, you're consenting to be recorded. We encourage you to introduce yourselves in the chat boxes, your name, your interest in food and circular economy, your work job description. And we encourage you to ask questions into the Q&A boxes. These are findable at the bottom of your Zoom panel. And then when we get to our discussion today, we do invite you, when asking questions, to turn on video and unmuting your microphone when called on by our facilitator. So just to see who's joining us today. Ryan, we can go to our next slide. So who is in our room? As always, we ask for favorite foods, given our focus. So rice remains a high contender, along with fruit, fish, soup, veggies, cheese, mangoes, everything, hummus, again, pounded foods, sushi, salad, pasta, lentils, banana. And if we look at our cities, we are well represented from Cape Town today and familiar from Johannesburg and Pretoria, Antananarivo, Nairobi, Dakar, Lagos, Yaoundé, Addis, Parkville, Zurich, Quezon, Muizenberg, Kampala, Chongwe, Nouakchott. Welcome, everybody. So you're joining our webinar as part of African City Food Month, which is a month of sharing resources and insights around food systems in African cities. We have had themes of food systems, resilience, and nutrition last week. And this week we're framing some content around sustainable food value chains. Next week is going to be on youth, women, business, and innovation in urban food systems. And we really invite you to share your insights and resources using the hashtag African City Food Month. Again, I'd like to recognize the partners. The campaign is brought to you by ICLEI, FAO, and RUAF, with our supporting partners as the Milan Urban Food Policy Pact, Ricolto, African Centre for Cities, WWF, the South African Urban Food and Farming Trust, and the MacArthur Foundation. So given that this week is on sustainable food value chains, we really are interested in exploring where our food comes from, how our food arrives in our cities and arrives on our plates. And we feel it's an incredibly important topic given that we are often unaware of the distance that food travels and often unaware of the associated impacts in that food value chain. What we've also been seeing at ICLEI is the emergence of circular economy as a concept for understanding how materials move through our economies. And the idea behind circular economy is to try and reshape how these materials contribute to the economy and how they impact our society and our environment. What is important to note about circular economy is that it is not just focused on the end of life of value chains and how to reincorporate wastes, but is actually proposing a set of strategies for how to rethink how we design products and services to keep their value as high as possible throughout their life cycle. So we think it's a really valuable provocation to link food systems thinking and circular economy thinking. And we're really pleased today that we're going to be facilitating the journey by our partners, the MacArthur Foundation, who have been putting quite a lot of thought into how food and circular economy connect and where the levers for positive social and environmental change could be. Indeed, last month they hosted a big food workshop to explore these ideas, and I definitely recommend visiting that. We put the link into our chat. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Emma Chow and Nick Jeffries, the project lead and senior expert in Ellen MacArthur Foundation's food initiative. And they've got a great journey set up for us. So please enjoy.
Thank you very much, Paul. Hello, bonjour everyone, and welcome, bienvenue to this webinar. My name is Nick Jeffries. I'm from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation's Food Initiative, and I'll be co-hosting this session on circular economy and food. And with me here is my colleague, Emma.
Hi everyone, it's great to be with you today. My name is Emma Chow, also with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, leading our food initiative, which we will share a bit more with you today, and really looking forward to what we hope and are sure will be a very interactive, engaging session, and to learn a lot from all of you tuning in from all around the world, but a lot from Africa today.
Yes, Emma, thanks for reminding us of that. This session is really intended to be interactive, a two-way exchange of ideas. And we've already had a little bit of that with that slide with all your favorite foods. There's a couple that jumped out at me, egusi. I have no idea what that is. Someone like caterpillars. There's something called saine. So yeah, already a few things for me to think about there. So we're also very eager to learn about where you work and the challenges you face, as hopefully you are interested to hear what we're going to share with you. So to get you into that sort of interactive frame of mind, to really lean in, we want you to share with us, I say where you are, where you work, and why you've tuned into this podcast and into this webinar. These are really important things for us, by the way, because we are at the moment expanding our activities into Africa, and so we're really in this learning phase. So if you could share with us all of that, and then while you're typing, oh, I need to share my screen, don't I? Sorry. Yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself. And while we're doing that, let me tell you a little bit about where we're based. So Emma and I are on the Isle of Wight, which is a little island off the south coast of England. It's about 2 hours from London. We're back in the office. We're sort of coming out of the whole lockdown. There's about sort of 20 to 30% of the people back in the office. So here's a photo of the Isle of Wight. We get a lot of sun, a lot of rain. We don't have any cities. This is the biggest town on the island is Ryde, on the top left, about 30,000 people, population. The whole island's about 140,000. And we're quite well known for garlic, tomatoes, cherries, and we grow a little bit of barley for beer. Why are we on the island? This is the reason we're on the island. This is the founder of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, Ellen MacArthur. And before she set up the foundation, she was actually a professional sailor. And this was a photo taken just when she finished her second round the world solo yacht race, breaking a record. So that's why we're on the island, and that's why we're called the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. Okay, Emma, I think we've given you a bit of time to analyse the feedback. Who's joining us today, and tell us a little bit about the participants.
Well, we've got a couple people who've shared in the chat. We have someone who's a researcher working in Mozambique, currently on sabbatical. I think a lot more still coming through, actually a fellow Canadian from Wilfrid Laurier University in Waterloo in Canada. I know that one. And just as a reminder, because we shared that slide quite quickly, but yes, we'd love to hear your name, where you're tuning in from today, organization, and what your interest is. So why are you joining? Yeah. And we'll dig into this more. We have someone, Feni, Director of East Africa at MVU. building social ventures in food space in Kenya. Amazing. Excellent. Ricardo, based in Abu Dhabi. Hello to you, all around the world. Tackling food waste and loss all over the world, and is interested in sharing some of the work already being done here in the UAE. Great.
Good selection.
Love how it's all sorts of geographies.
Yes, so let's continue to be interactive. We are especially interested in you sharing, as we sort of go through this session, any examples that come to mind from companies or projects or initiatives in your cities. We're always on the lookout for great examples of circular economy or sort of nature-inspired systems, or valorize clever uses of waste and stuff like that. So please continue to share throughout this session. Okay, so I think we're ready to get stuck in. So let me just show what's on the menu today. So first, we're going to do a little bit of an intro to the circular economy, and then we're going to sort of show how it applies to food and agriculture, which of course is a hugely important economic sector globally, but particularly in Africa, where more than half the working population is involved in agriculture. And then we'll talk a little bit more about our food initiative, which is actually focused on cities and their food systems, which is probably where most of you work. But again, very important, particularly in the Africa context, where there is expected to be a doubling of urban population in the next 30 years. And then finally, we can give you some pointers on tools on how you can engage more deeply if you found what we have said of interest. And these tools, we hope, like everything we strive to do, will help you and your organization to be more successful in achieving your goals. So there'll be at least 2 official breaks for questions, but please feel free to type your questions into the chat box and we'll pick them up at the appropriate time. So a little bit about our organization. We're a charity comprising about 140 people. We have staff from over 26 nationalities, including Senegal and South Africa. Most of us are based in the UK, but we do have an office in the US and in Brazil and in China. And our mission, everything we do, is about reimagining and redesigning to build a positive future using the framework of a circular economy. Not just in food, but across the whole economy, including fashion, plastic packaging, the built environment, mobility, and many other sectors. But we're not just looking at the technology, the material challenges, but we also consider deeply the important role of what we call enablers, things like policy, finance, learning, and really importantly, design, the role that these enablers play in driving the transition. And here are some of the designers that we work with from all over the African continent, and also from a wide range of disciplines, which just goes to show how relevant and exciting the idea of circular economy has become to many young professionals. But before we continue much further, we need to ask a basic and pretty, an obvious question. What is the circular economy? But before we proceed with sharing that with you, we want to just do a little bit of a poll to find out how much our audience knows about circular economy already. So Ryan, could we share the first poll question, please? Here we go. So how much do you know about the circular economy? So have you never heard of it? Are you aware of it? Are you very familiar with the circular economy, or do you actively apply it to your work? I'll give you 30 or 40 seconds to decide your knowledge. Oh, we've got pretty well everyone's heard of it, which is good. And then we've got a bit of a spread on the other 3. So most are aware of it. So that's probably the biggest, most are aware of it. A third are very familiar with it. and a quarter apply circular economy principles and practice. So we've got a bit
Excellent.
of a spread of knowledge
Good
here.
Variety, yes.
Okay,
Very
thank
helpful.
you.
Thank you for partaking.
Let's just share the results. Oops. Can everyone see that? Yes, we've got a little bit of, yeah, only 7% have never heard of it. And then there's a sort of a reasonably even spread in the other 3, where sort of mostly people are aware of it, but not really sure of the details. So Emma, could you share some details?
I think Ryan can just close it.
Yeah, Ryan, you can close the poll now if you want. Oh,
there we go.
Okay.
Perfect.
So you happy with that slide?
Right here is great. Okay, so for those who are familiar, this may be a bit of a refresh, but especially for folks who have never heard of circular economy before and perhaps intrigued as to why circular, let's start actually with the linear economy. And we define the linear economy by a take, make, waste system. We take all sorts of finite materials out of the ground, whether it's from mines and minerals or fresh water, and we make things out of it, including food, but also all the products that we consume in today's economy. And most of these products and materials end up going to waste, or not even being collected, but if they are, often being incinerated or ending up in landfill, and therefore not making the most value of what they contain. And this is true in virtually all areas of the economy today, and including food. So this is one diagram that we developed in 2018, and it shows this linear material flow when it comes to food and agriculture. So you see on the left-hand side, those inputs like fresh water, chemical inputs used for fertilizers, fossil energy for the equipment for making fertilizers, and soil. Soil is so essential, and that is also a finite resource that we are rapidly degrading. So we're growing food in a way that is linear in the sense that it's highly extractive, damaging, and polluting and unhealthy for people and planet. But at the same time, as that food continues on its journey, as we're turning primary ingredients into dishes, into products, we're consuming it, we're actually seeing huge losses along the journey. And you can see those peel off flows along the bottom there. And of the 2.8 billion tons of organic waste that is accumulating in cities around the world, these urban centers around the world where most food is eaten nowadays, less than 2% is actually collected and treated in a valuable way. And so that's a big opportunity from a material standpoint, because there's so much organic matter and nutrients that we can use, both within the food system and beyond. And in comparison, when we think about how do we transform the system, that's where we can look to circular economy. And circular economy, as Nick was mentioning earlier, that is the entire mission of our organization at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. And these 3 principles of designing out waste and pollution, keeping products and materials in use, and regenerating natural systems are what underpins all of our work. And similar to all industries, we can apply these to food and explore what that could look like. So Nick, why don't we bring this to life a bit, because that was an initial, quite conceptual introduction.
Okay, yes. Yeah, so very on in my circular economy career, I came across a story of a farmer from Japan called Taku Furunu. And he managed to triple his profits from his 4-acre farm by incorporating ducks and fish into his paddy field, and they help with pest control and fertilization. So ever since then, I've been very intrigued about this nature-inspired agroecological approach to farming and how it would look in different contexts. Now, of course, this question is very pertinent in the African context, which has such a huge number of smallholder farmers. Well, in Uganda, I came across a farmer called Emma Nyalimu. Now, she's configured her 1-acre farm in a way that makes great profits, despite having quite poor soil. And she does this in a way that avoids use of costly chemicals and other inputs, and therefore protects her health as well as the health of the surrounding system. So how she does this is she splits her 1 acre farm into 4 quarter-acre plots. So in the first plot, the top left, she has pigs and chickens. Now the pigs, they generate a lot of poop, and she treats this poop in a way, she exposes it to the air, and then she covers it, and she encourages the growth of insect larvae, maggots. And she uses these maggots to feed both her chickens and her fish, and thereby reducing her feed costs by up to 80%. In the second plot, she keeps cattle. Once again, although these cattle produce milk, but they also produce a lot of poop. She puts that into an anaerobic digester, and then that gives her cooking gas, which is non-polluting cooking gas, but also avoids use of charcoal, and therefore addresses the issue of deforestation. And then the leftovers from the anaerobic digester, the slurry, she uses in plot 3, bottom right, which is where she grows matoke, green bananas, very popular in Uganda. Now that soil is, she was told that soil is not so good. It's sort of laterite red soil. But using the slurry from the anaerobic digester, using the pig poop, which after breeding the maggots, she introduces worms. So she creates this vermicompost. She also collects the urine. All of that goes into plot 3, and she achieves astounding yields from that little quarter-acre plot against all the advice that she's been given. And then in the final plot, the bottom left, she grows fish, tilapia and catfish. The catfish, the water is actually is circulated through active vegetable beds and purified, and then put back into the fish farm. And then she also grows tomatoes using the compost from elsewhere on the site. And she grows fodder for her pigs, her chickens, and her cattle using a hydroponic system. So there's multiple revenue streams being generated here. It's a small plot, and also she's also reducing her costs, both her feed costs, but also her cooking fuel costs. So this is classic circular economy. It's a circular system, reimagining waste, nature inspired, and making like the most, or getting huge amounts out of just a small area. So I think that's a really inspiring example and very relevant to the African context. Emma,
yeah,
do you have an example to share?
I have one example to share called Waste Transformers, and I really love sharing this company because it's not only a solution but also comes with an innovative business model. What you're seeing on the screen is actually one of these waste transforming sites, or rather the solution itself, and it's a small scale distributed treatment center facility for organic waste. So they're taking organic waste like scraps from commercial kitchens, food processing facilities, etc., wherever there might be a significant volume of these what we'll call food byproducts, and rather than letting that rot or go to landfill or be incinerated, actually it's treated in a way that creates multiple products. So you're getting what we can refer to as a value cascade. So rather than just getting bioenergy, which they do get, that's one thing that they get, but they also are getting a compost or organic fertilizer and compost. And so it's a liquid organic fertilizer plus the compost, which is the organic matter. So they're getting these 3 products from this unit, and they're able to do it in a distributed way. So they actually have developed this model where it's an enterprise, an entrepreneur model. So an individual would be operating and responsible for that unit in their community, in their industrial facility, etc., rather than having to ship these volumes from many different places to a much bigger facility. So it's small scale, distributed, and new business model, allowing for new employment opportunities in these places, a great bioeconomy solution, and just an example of, again, taking what otherwise might be seen as waste streams and turning it into value, which includes going back into food production.
Nice. And you said there's some installation in Sierra Leone and South Africa.
And South Africa,
okay,
yeah.
Amazing. Great. Well, I think we should have a little break for questions. let's just check the chat box and see if there's anything.
So there's one question from Cardick saying, "Hi Nick, in the farm example, is digestate further vermicomposted?"
I don't think so. When she was describing it, she just said the slurry from the biodigester then goes to the matoke. I'm not sure, but I think it's a direct application. Oh, by the way, we will be sharing. We only able to sort of summarize briefly some of these examples, but we'll be sharing links after this webinar to the ICLEI team, who will then put them on their website to give you more information about some of the examples and the various other things we're talking about today. So thanks for that question, Kartik. Any other questions?
And also, as Nick mentioned earlier on, as we proceed, do feel free to share what you think are great examples, whether it's your own or one that you know, because we'd love to hear about them.
Yeah. And if anyone can tell me what egusi is, or saine, or where buake is, feel free, to share that information as well. So, do we have anything that's in? No.
Was one more question from Joanna. Was the Uganda farmer working with a particular organization?
No, I think no. Well, the farm was her husband's, and actually how she introduced the story is because the inheritance law in Uganda means that these big farms, and if you have like 5 or 6 children, then it's like automatically split to 6, and then they have children, and then it's split again, and so the farm sizes are getting smaller and smaller, and that's why it's sort of almost driving innovation and creativity to get more from less. I believe she's a vet as well, and she worked for an organization. I think she might have worked with the Ministry of Agriculture in Entebbe, but I will share a talk she did with later after the webinar. Thank you for that question, Chana.
Egusi,
melon seeds
used for soup in Nigeria. I'm very intrigued.
and Ghana.
It's making me think of that product that I discovered in New York, that's watermelon seeds into a, but that was for a butter. It was a type of spread, not a soup.
Whoa. Yeah, plenty of uses for seeds then. Thank you, Philip. Yeah. Maths, science. Okay, thank you. Margaret has shared a little bit more information about Dr. Nalayima. Great example, circular producing. Yeah, and yeah, thank you, Mercy, Dr. Chikoko. And yeah, please look into the duck rice example that I sort of hinted at before. In fact, for Taku Furuno, he first did that in the 90s, and now there are over 200,000 farmers around Southeast Asia using that duck, rice, loach fish symbiosis, which creates such a fertile paddy water that he also grows figs and other vegetables around the side of the paddy field. And so he's gone from rice as his output to rice, duck, eggs, duck, meat, fish, and vegetables. So he's got 5 products where he used to have 1. So yeah, this is great. This is exactly the kind of circular thinking that we like. Okay, well, we'll continue to monitor the chat for questions, but maybe we should move on now. Any more? Okay. Right, so let's turn to food. So this is a topic that we started looking at about 3 years ago. Now, at this point, we had come to the realization that the global food system, despite appearances, had some challenges. And we identified 3 particular areas. Firstly, it's incredibly wasteful. 30% of food that is grown is thrown away, and that's either in post-consumer losses or post-consumer waste, or losses between harvest and the market. Secondly, the way food is grown is very degrading to soils generally, and also polluting to nature and the atmosphere. In fact, 25% of human-generated emissions come from the food and agriculture system. And finally, it's actually quite unhealthy for humans. 850 million people still, roughly, are still hungry. And perversely, 1 billion people or more than 1 billion people are overweight or obese. So clearly the system needs to change. So in 2018, we did a detailed analysis of the global food system. And this is basically a summary of our findings. For every dollar we spend on food, we spend $2 on, or $2 equivalent on negative impacts. And the negative impacts are divided between, well, half of the negative impacts are to do with what we call consumption impacts. So that's things like hunger, obesity, chronic metabolic diseases associated with diet. And then half of them are production impacts. So impacts associated with the way we grow. So these are things like carbon emissions, pollution to water bodies, the increase in antimicrobial resistance, its contribution to air pollution, and so on. So how can we change the situation? This is the question we asked. Well, from the very start, we felt strongly that cities held the key to the solution. Emma.
Yes, indeed, Nick. So we had this hypothesis that cities are a really great place to start when it comes to focusing action. And it's because we're rapidly urbanizing global population. And already today, most food is flowing into cities. And by 2050, we can anticipate that about 80% of the world's food will be destined for cities. So we can think of cities as these massive consumption hubs, but helping to drive a linear system today, right? They're these endpoints of a linear system, driving the unhealthy production of food upstream, but also accumulating what becomes organic waste in the cities, costing the money to treat and collect, and also often creating negative health impacts for citizens in the cities. But cities have this opportunity to reimagine their role, to go from being these endpoints to actually more like these junctions that are transforming a positive food system and shaping healthy, livable cities for their people, but also sending this positive ripple effect far beyond their boundaries to the places, the rural communities where the food that's eaten in cities is oftentimes grown. So cities can take actions under what we call 3 ambition areas, which are shaped by those circular economy principles that we laid out earlier on. So cities can source food that's grown in regenerative ways, in ways that are supporting biodiversity, helping to minimize emissions and actually pull down carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and build healthy soils. And also cities can be making the most of their food. So that's about designing out the concept of waste altogether. As Nick was mentioning earlier, when we look in nature, when untouched, the concept of waste doesn't exist. It's very elegant, and all of what is waste to one tree or one plant becomes food and input for another, or the worms and the insects and all those microorganisms in the soil. So how can we learn from nature and create systems that make the most of food in cities where a lot of this organic waste is arising? And that includes going into agriculture, right, in terms of biofertilizers, compost, feed for agriculture and livestock, but also into the broader bioeconomy, biomaterials. We're seeing a lot of incredible innovations as well, and bioenergy as one of those co-products of the treatment, like we saw with waste transformers. And then on the right, you see a 3rd ambition area, which is really like an enabler of those first 2, and it's about food design and marketing. So it's about focusing on the portion of food that is transformed, we can say it's designed, from those primary ingredients into products that you see in markets or on grocery store shelves, and dishes in restaurants or eateries or carts on the side of the street. And one or several people have made decisions to design that food that we're then presented with in our food environments. So it's about saying, how do we get to that design stage and actually design with the system in mind and create healthy, affordable, delicious food that also happens to be good for nature as well. and use marketing and branding to help make those products more and more available and accessible and desirable. So these are the three areas. And what we found in our analysis is if cities around the world take actions at scale in these three dimensions by 2050, we can see significant benefits. Benefits across economic, health, and environmental domains that would total about $2.7 trillion each year. So it's a significant contribution that the circular economy framework can bring to positive food system transformation, focused on action in cities. And if you want to learn more, I encourage you to visit emf.org, where you can find our Cities and Circular Economy for Food report that was published in January 2019 at the World Economic Forum. And that's where some of these key visuals and evidence points that you've seen so far have come from. And also later in 2019, we released a report called Completing the Picture, how the circular economy tackles climate change, recognizing that switching to renewables and taking care of the energy portion of the climate challenge is just over 1/2 of the solution, but the rest is part of embedded emissions. And that report dives deeply into food and agriculture as well, specifically through the lens of climate change. Now, before we move on, I think we have one more poll that I'll ask Ryan to pull up.
Yeah, and we have had some questions coming in while Emma was presenting there, one from Solo, and we'll definitely come to that. At the next question break, we'll definitely answer your question, Solo. He's asked a question about whether the circular economy has limitations, which is a very good question, and be assured I will answer that. I'll try and answer that question in the next question break. So Ryan, could you pull up the next poll question, please? The next question, here we are. Okay, now this is, I'll talk through this one. This is about just finding out from all the participants today what your top priority is in regards to your region or city's food system. Is it food security? Is it climate mitigation or resilience? Is it health and diets? Is it environment and waste management? Is it about cost reduction? Or maybe it's about something that we haven't thought of, which, if it is, the one person so far has had that, please feel free to share what that other thing is. We'll give you 30 or 40 seconds on that. So we have food security is leading the way at the moment, followed by health and diets and environment and waste management, which are about the same, neck and neck at number 2. Environment's just edged ahead. Climate resilience is after that. And then that cost reduction, and then we just have some intriguing others. But it looks like food security is number 1. We're going to end the poll now.
A couple of things have come through the chat. Joanna is saying effective nutrient cycling and soil health.
Yeah, okay.
Great.
Yeah.
Getting food Joanna. To millions of poor people in the country, South Africa, Manfred.
Yeah, thanks.
Excellent.
So there are the results. Food security has come out at number 1 with 37%. And then just after that, environment and waste management, and then health and diets, and then climate resilience. And then we have cost, and then other.
Yeah, and Fenny has just shared saying our work is now focusing on increasing farmers' income, working towards climate resilient farmers. Okay, climate resilience. Yeah. Excellent.
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing now. Thank you for that. Oh, share results.
Yeah, and I'd say the food security piece as a priority is something amidst COVID-19 impacts we're seeing is indeed identified across virtually all cities that we've been engaging with. You'll hear in a couple of moments, but London, New York, Sao Paulo, when we spoke with them as our 3 cities that we're most closely working with these days, in that big food workshop session, that was what they all identified: food security, and just what actions can the cities take to help address these issues, and how do they work with other players, like private sector, what's their role in all of this. So definitely resonates not only with you all on the line today. Right.
Okay, shall I move forward?
Yeah.
So we're going to go to, so here are a few, let's just get rid of that.
There we go. So these are a couple of graphics that we launched just after World Food Day last year in October. And it was a campaign that asked questions like this: what if the food you didn't eat became something delicious? So going into new food products that might be able to help to feed people, right? If it's edible food, it should be eaten rather than going to waste. And also, what about those parts of the food, like apple cores or all sorts of things that we see as scraps, but can we get innovative and create new food ingredients out of them? And then also, I like this one. This is from our campaigns from our Latin America team, because we did translated versions in Brazil, in Portuguese, and then also in Spanish in the regions. And this is about, can your breakfast, what if your breakfast could help build biodiversity? And that positive notion is really at the heart of circular economy. It's about saying, okay, today we're embedded in this linear degrading system, but rather than just trying to tweak it and undo the damage, can we actually reimagine, and especially with food, harness all the positive potential where it can actually help create new food, can build biodiversity. So I quite like them, and I think it resonates with some of the themes that were pulled out, like environment, biodiversity, food security, that were highlighted just now in the poll. So I mentioned a few moments ago, Sao Paulo, New York, and London. These are 3 what we call partner cities that we've been working with since launching the Food Initiative in June 2019. And we're focusing on supporting the municipalities, but also the local players. So it can be private sector, NGOs, farmer associations, everyone who's involved in shaping those urban food systems, to take this vision of the circular economy for food in cities and actually apply it in different contexts on the ground and demonstrate what the benefits can be. How can circularity be used as a framework to help these cities as places move faster towards their identified priorities? And we're also working with a series of partners at the global level, and you can see their logos here on the screen. So we're engaging private sector industry players from across the entire food value chain, everyone from brands and digital solutions to organic resource managers like Veolia, and also philanthropic partners. So we have Gulbenkian, Dune, IKEA Foundation, and Porticus as well involved. So again, we'll spend a few moments
bringing this to life.
Bringing this to life.
Okay,
yes,
make it a little real.
Making a bit more real.
Okay, by showing an example. All right, so my example, to support what Emma's just been saying, comes from Tanzania, and it's a company called Biobuutz. But they are just one of many examples from around Africa, sort of have a sort of similar model. Agroprotein in South Africa is one company, Sanogy in Kenya is another. And they have been making use of a technology that's been around for 400 million years. Yes, you heard correctly, 400 million years. Well, it's not exactly a technology. What I'm talking about is insects. And many of these entrepreneurs are using insects to process organic waste into useful revenue-earning products such as fish feed, poultry, pig feed. And by doing so, they're reimagining this problematic organic waste stream. In African cities, over half of the waste is organic. And they're reimagining it, and it becomes the raw materials for a regional bioeconomy. And that's why I've crossed out wastewater plants, waste treatment plants, and I've used the word biorefineries, because that is that concept of factories that are fed by discarded organic resources, creating really useful products. It could be animal feed, it could be structural materials, it could be all kinds of things. That's a really a key part of the sort of circular economy vision. And it's not just about solid waste. I visited wastewater treatment plants in Denmark, and similar wastewater treatment plants exist in Colorado, in Austria, that are actually generating energy rather than consuming energy. In the US, 2.5% of the energy demand goes into treating wastewater. And actually, if you could turn your wastewater treatment plants from energy guzzling things to energy creating things, that could be really game changing. There was even a wastewater treatment plant in the south of Spain. They have a clever use of algae, which reduces the oxygen that's needed to pump in to do the biological treatment. And then they biodigest the algae, and they pressurize the gas from that, and they use it to power a fleet of cars. So you've got wastewater treatment plants are like service stations. It's that's the whole biorefinery concept. And the final thing to say about these processes, these companies like Biobuutz and Agroprotein and Sanogy, is what's left over after the insects have feasted on the organic waste is the frass, which, like vermicompost, is a very, very high quality, nutrient dense soil enhancer, which then can be returned to the fields around the city, and therefore support the next generation of growing. And so therefore we've got that sort of lovely virtuous loop that Emma was hinting at, from the the food produced in the countryside, consumed in the cities, and then the nutrients returning in that sort of virtuous circle. Emma, I think you have an example from Brazil.
I do. There's one other.
Oh yes. Oh, okay. Yes. Oh, of course. This is one of my favorite guys. This guy has been a hero of mine for many years, since I discovered him a few years ago. And this brings this, this idea of regenerative agriculture. We want to go from, sort of reducing harm agriculture to actually having a positive impact. And Jacobo Sawadogo in Burkina Faso, he had a 16 hectare. It was basically in the Sahel. Really arid, not productive at all. And over a number of years, using quite traditional techniques, sort of water harvesting techniques, using mulch, using compost, he transformed this area into a very productive, multi-species food forest. And therefore, creating, improving food security, and actually creating its own little sort of microclimate in that area. So he actually raised the water levels in that area. And that is like the sort of gold standard. That's what we're trying to aim for, this sort of regenerative, positive impact agriculture. Sorry, I missed that. How could I have forgotten Jacobo?
It's a great segue, because the one from another continent, so moving over to Sao Paulo, where we're working very closely, and it's been great over the past couple of years to learn about and be involved in this program called Connect the Dots, which is Sao Paulo's project that is focused on strengthening the local agriculture value chain and really finding new ways to support smallholder agroecological farmers through various means, which includes technical assistance and capacity building, and also ways to use digital capabilities to enable all of this, and recognizing that it's very much a moving and evolving system. And this is one visual that's from one of their publications, just looking at those different connections. It's why the program is called Connecting the Dots. So you can see everything from municipal markets and school meals, and you may be aware of Sao Paulo's school feeding program, where they're providing children in schools with meals every day, and they're starting to set targets, about 30% being organic for those school meals. So saying, how can we use our public procurement power in the city to be increasing demand and supporting the adoption of regenerative practices amongst farmers in the surrounding land, the green belt around the city. So there's lots of different connection points, and this is a program of figuring out how the city can best be leveraging their demand power, their industry players, all the different stakeholders in the cities to support these farmers. So that's one that I wanted to share today. Now we do have a moment here.
We've got lots of questions coming in.
Hopefully address as many questions as we can. I know there's lots coming in from the chat, but also in the Q&A.
Yeah.
I did see one. If we
go
back to the biorefinery.
Okay. Biorefinery. Okay. I've had one that's been sort of hanging for quite a while.
Okay.
Which is just, it refers to the first half of the presentation. So it's about just not to over-romanticize the circular economy, keep it realistic. Could you talk a little about its limitations? So that's a really good question. So the classic circular economy systems diagram, which shows, some people call the butterfly diagram, which shows sort of the economy as having two types of materials, technical materials, things that we use, mobile phones, cars, buildings, that kind of stuff, and then biological materials, things that we consume, food, and so on. Yes, it's very material focused, and just if you were just to sort of follow that circular economy model, it probably wouldn't work, because enablers are very important. It's so important to have the right policy enablers in place, which could include sort of incentivizing repair, or incentivizing reuse schemes, or even government public procurement, or another name is finance as well. That's why we do a lot of work about directing finance to circular economy projects. And also things like education. We need people. We need the next generation of designers to think more about the world is a complex world system. It's not a mechanical system. So the circular economy on its own, as a sort of materials model, it needs also the system conditions to be right. So that's one aspect of the answer. But another thing to comment on is, like, we always talk about business models, about promoting business models like access over ownership. Do you need to own a washing machine, or do you need clean clothes, or do you need to own a car, or do you need to get from A to B? But we have to be a little bit careful about unintended consequences, because business models having circular business models doesn't necessarily lead to less stuff being produced. So there has to be a little bit of regulation over that, and there has to be, as I say, the enablers have to be in place. It's not just a material challenge.
And I would just add on to it, specifically for food, as when we think back to that $1 to $2 slide that Nick spoke to earlier, half of the costs are related to, as I think about, like, what's on the plate or not. So obesity, hunger, micronutrient deficiency, etc. And then the other half are related to how food is produced. So pesticide exposure, air pollution, water contamination, and how we manage waste and byproducts. Circular economy can most directly affect that second half of the costs. And to achieve a truly thriving food system, we need to have everyone has access and they have healthy food on their plates that is also part of a healthy system. So circular economy can provide a significant contribution to realizing that holistically healthy system, but we're not necessarily dietary experts or able to solve all of the problems at once.
Yeah, indeed. And when we did our, in October of last year, we published our circular economy and climate change paper. And so we looked at the food system specifically and the emissions it generated. And we had 6 circular economy levers that address those emissions. And we thought that we could address about 50% of it. So that, that sort of, certainly for the food system, that kind of, puts it into perspective. As Emma mentioned, dietary changes, behavioural changes are also a big part of the challenge.
Yeah, there are a couple of questions too that I just want to pick up because they come to this theme of scaling too. One of them is about how about the scalability of biorefineries? Do you want to speak about that one?
The scalability of biorefineries.
Or perhaps
Yeah, I mean, if we look at wastewater, okay, the example I gave, which is two examples I gave: wastewater treatment plants in Denmark that are energy positive, and they also produce nutrients. So what comes out is useful to farmers locally. So that's a biorefinery. The one particular one I visited served a population of 500,000. And there's no reason why it couldn't serve, be expanded to serve a million. So it's scalable. Agri-protein in South Africa that takes organic waste and converts it into insect feed and, of course, soil enhancers. They are processing about 250 tons a day, 90,000 tons a year. And so, yeah, I think they are scalable. They are scalable just like factories. They are factories basically, except the feedstock isn't finite materials. It's discarded organic resources from cities.
I want to pick up Yvonne's question, which is for high urbanization cities, food often comes from countryside or peri-urban areas. Do you have any experience to better engage with other municipalities in the nearby regions, particularly along the food supply chain? Really great point, because that's something that we realized early on in our research is actually cities can't supply all the food that they will consume. If we maximize urban food production on, again, global average, this would be about 1/3 of the food that cities actually need for consumption. So to create resilient systems, there needs to be diverse sourcing. So sourcing indeed, maybe some proportion from local in the city, then in that peri-urban zone, and then far away. And you start to get these overlapping zones where food grown in a particular rural area can go to many different cities. So in our work, what we've realized is really critical, but perhaps a bit disconnected today, is the relationship between municipalities and city players with regional actors and regional governance bodies or governing bodies. What's coming to my mind is some of the work we've done with cities in Portugal. And if you look on our website, we did 4 case studies on cities that were published in 2019. And one of them was with Porto. And Portugal, there's all sorts of little cities that have, again, these overlapping peri-urban zones. And we've been able to bring them together. And one of our partners, Gulbenkian Foundation, has been very much integral to facilitating this, to have exchanges between the cities and start to have these connection points and conversations to explore what collective solutions can look like. Because a city alone can take action, but actually to influence and shift, especially farming in an entire region or an entire country, actually it's going to be much more powerful when the cities are taking aligned action collaboratively.
Yeah. Someone called Terunga wants to video in, and so we'll let them do that. Kira has asked, do you think donut economic theory answers the limitations of circular economies? So donut economics, for those who don't know, sort of imagines that there is a safe sort of operating space for the economy, which is the ring. Whereas outside the ring is where you exceed the planetary boundaries, so you exceed, the carbon emissions, freshwater consumption, and so on. But then the hole in the middle is where you fall below the basic social needs. To answer your question, Kira, I think that circular economy and donut economics are actually quite complementary. And there was a whole chapter in Kate Raworth's book that was dedicated to circular economy. Because the third key principle of the circular economy is about regenerating natural systems. So we want the economy to have a positive impact on the environment and society. And so I think they are complementary. Now, Terunga, there is a question, someone asked a question about what Danone and all of our advisory board and Veolia and Yara are doing as part of the mobilization. So maybe I'll let Emma answer that. And Terunga, if you want to ask a question live by video, then maybe you can go next. So what are companies like Danone and what are our advisory board members doing? Is it someone has suggested it might only be greenwashing.
Yeah, I think what hopefully will be helpful is giving a bit of background on our approach for these multi-year programs like food, and to mention, we also have programs focused on plastics with the new plastics economy, and fashion with Make Fashion Circular, and an emerging program focused on finance. So these are what we call our systemic initiatives. And in them, what we find is that enables us to be successful is engaging some of these big multinationals that have big footprints and are hugely influential in the particular industry. So for us, it's food. And so we've been quite strategic in terms of developing that group to have representation from across the entire value chain. But we do have criteria, and it is about forming long-term partnerships with partners who have expressed intent and commitment to the vision and starting to take action. And our role is to provide thought leadership, raising the ambition level, and supporting demonstrations. So we do engage these companies in our local demonstration in London, Sao Paulo, New York, and increasingly China, and still exploring East Africa, to start to showcase what their activities can look like, right? They do have a big, as I mentioned, big footprint. So what would it mean to actually reimagine business models, to reimagine products or services, to actually be helping to accelerate this transition to a circular economy? And for us, it's focused primarily on food. But hopefully that gives a bit of background on the why we even engage with these big companies in our programs, and what we're beginning to do with them. We're now 1 year into a 3-year mobilization phase. So it's still relatively early days and a long trajectory as we look forward. But we're hopeful of what we can demonstrate, and then start to look at what are the mechanisms for making this much more widespread across the food industry and food systems around the world.
So we have got a few more questions, but would like to finish the last part of this presentation, and then any time we have at the end, we can then just address the questions, because there's just quite an interesting participatory thing that we want to share with you, and we want to make sure we have time for that. So we may well return to those questions, the remaining questions. So yeah, I just want to say a little bit about how you can engage more. So we have lots of information, including all of our publications. We published about 23 reports in the last 10 years, and that's all on the emf.org website. So go there. There's lots of learning materials, and we really have looked at circular economy across all, many sectors of the economy, many regions of the world, and actually keep a lookout this September or October, when we're going to be publishing a paper that we have written with ICLEI, the University of Lagos, and Chatham House, and that looks at specifically the opportunities and challenges of applying circular economy to the Africa context. We also have a number of tools and frameworks. Once again, you can find these on a website. I think the audience, well, certainly the policy makers, the local government, district council workers, people who work for those organisations in the audience will appreciate some of the material that our institutions, policy and city and governments team have produced, including a toolkit for policymakers, which helps identify all of the policy levers that I was talking about, that creates the sort of the enabling conditions to support a circular economy. And then there is also some quite lively, as lively as you have been today, in fact, online communities, such as our LinkedIn design community, which has over 15,000 members. We have a Facebook community, an Instagram community, and then all of the video. We produce a lot of video content, including, Paul mentioned earlier, we had a big food workshop a couple of weeks ago with chefs from Johannesburg. We had innovators from Kenya, and so yeah. So on that YouTube, EMF YouTube channel, you can find all of our past video content, a lot of stuff there. But Emma, I think there is one very specific way that our audience can engage with the food initiative.
Yeah, we were really looking forward to today and having this chance to engage, especially with lots of city-focused folks, whether you work in municipalities or not. And we are currently behind the scenes working on a series of tools. I saw a question just come in from Maria about what would be useful in terms of guidance and tools for different actors in the system to take practical steps. And that is exactly what we're trying to help equip stakeholders with by creating publicly accessible tools and resources. One of which is a questionnaire, and it's what we're currently calling it, Circular Economy for Food City Government Questionnaire. And it's aimed to be a starting point for city officials to assess where their food system is at today on the spectrum of circular economy. And it's 12 questions, which we hope are fairly straightforward, but we want to hear your thoughts because we want to get feedback from the actual target end users before we actually finalize. Our aim and hope is that if our hypothesis is confirmed and this is a valuable tool for stakeholders, then we do aim to take it from a PDF form to a web-based tool that makes it easier for you to use. And so this is something that has not been released. This is a draft version, but I'm going to give you a bit of context, and then I'll share a link that we'll make sure is circulated afterwards too, where you can visit in the next couple of weeks and document your feedback. So there's two core sections. The first one is looking at the material flow. So that's looking at the food that's being sourced and how the byproduct and waste is being managed. And then the second section, which is very important, not materials focused, but rather governance and enabling conditions. And there's a one-page mini library of some top examples from around the world and links, which hopefully makes it easier to just learn more and check out what other cities are doing and actors, and then a scoring key to actually assess where you sit today on the spectrum. So questions look something like this. This is question 1A. Do you actively support sourcing food from peri-urban areas or farms rather to feed your city? You might know no, then you check no. You might say, I don't know, that's okay too. Or you might say yes, and you would check all that apply. So if it's through public procurement, maybe you have policies that are saying X% of food needs to be sourced from local family farmers like we see in Sao Paulo, then you would check that box, and so on. This tool is designed to have two pieces of value for you and your city. One is, yes, the scoring and getting a sense of where you're at and being able to use this as a tool again and again as you take action and make progress on the journey to see how you're measuring and scoring over time, but also as a tool to understand what circular economy is as applied to food, because as we've discussed today and the many questions that have come through, it's not straightforward, and there's many different ways to apply circular economy thinking. So circular economy is still a newer concept applied to food, and therefore we hope that the explanation and examples can help build the understanding internally and also help you, if you are more familiar with circular economy, to share it with your colleagues and have these types of discussions. And so you'll see a series of 12 questions in a similar format, and then a scoring key that you'll get a score between 0 to 200. And that will give you that spectrum, 0 being totally linear, 200 being pretty good and excelling in when it comes to circular economy for food. Now we've created an online form, and I'm just going to send this through the chat now. If you've ever used Red Pen before, you may be familiar with the setup. If not, when you click on the page, you'll just have a simple email sign up. You won't get spammed or anything, but it just will allow you to actually make comments. I invite you to, after the webinar and again in the next 2 weeks, click through the link that was just shared, and we'll work with Paul to make sure that gets circulated as well. But we'd love to hear your feedback, and with the red pen, you can at any time of the day drop in your comments and log them, and we will review them in a couple of weeks' time. So you have until August 7th to share your feedback, and you're welcome to go through the questions themselves and even score your city if that's of interest. So that is something that we're very happy to have been able to share with you today. Oh, one final point is we've allocated the feedback forms according to your last name. So please, when you do go to log your feedback, just click into the appropriate form based on the initials at the bottom. You'll see surname begins with A to G, H to M, and so on.
Okay. I think we have time for a few more questions. We do a few quick fire questions.
Yes.
Can you do that one? Any dedicated food think tank groups you're hanging out with?
Oh, dedicated food
or...
think tanks. There's quite a few. I mean, I quite like Food Tank.
Yeah.
Food Tank with Danielle
Nierenberg.
Yes.
Nierenberg, Food Tank. Yeah.
Great weekly newsletters. I think they're on a weekly basis.
Yeah, and they do good weekly videos as well.
And videos, yeah. So that's a really good source of the latest information.
For Regenerative, Rodale Institute.
Rodale Institute for Regenerative Organic Certification, which has just moved out of pilot stage. I'm trying to think of other think tanks.
Yeah. Let's think about that, and we can we can share some.
Yeah.
I want to answer some questions from Usman. Are the various cases of the application of the circular economy presented supported by a government food policy? Well, I can speak for Europe. So the European Union have just published their sustainable food strategy. We were part of the process of developing that. And so now circular economy is very much embedded in that, and also the green growth.
The farm to fork.
The farm to fork, yes. Yeah. So to answer that, certainly in Europe, yes. And then Fenny has asked, can you talk a bit about how the farmers made the switch to regenerative farming, examples and stuff? Well, I can talk about India, where there is a growing, so it's like a proxy for regenerative. It's called zero budget natural farming. And that is, I think there's something like 150,000 is one state, Uttar Pradesh, I think, in northern India. There's 150,000 zero budget natural farmers, or maybe even more than that. That figure was from about 2 years ago. And what I felt drives that is two things. Firstly, early adopters showing that actually farming in that kind of way, and it involves not using chemical inputs, but having soil inoculants that activates the soil. It's about mulching, so avoiding evaporative losses, and also using sort of efficient distribution systems for water. And yields have gone up. Resilience has gone up. There's a sort of anecdotal story about a banana plantation which stayed standing after a hailstorm, while around it the other banana plantations had sort of, the plants had fallen down. The farmer said his comment was, my banana plants are stronger. So it's a combination of sort of early adopters proving the case, but then in that particular province, I think it's Uttar Pradesh, it's actually zero budget natural farming is part of the official state policy. So it's actually it's supported, by the state government. So it's a combination of those things. And it seems to, in those instances, it just seems to make business sense. And then from Jean-Michel, how do we talk about a circular economy with regard to household waste, skills loss, for example? Well, households, make their contribution to organic waste, and if you have effective collection systems for that organic waste can be valorized in all the ways we've described. Also, how circular economy can be applied to the home. I've actually written a piece on that a year or two back, so I will share that afterwards with ICLEI, and they'll share that on their website. And skills loss. Well, I think in a way, there is, what the circular economy encourages is repair, refurbishment, remanufacturing, and actually those kind of things require more skills. And so there is a possibility by having that circular mindset of those kinds of reuse. Actually, it builds rather than loses skills.
Yeah, I think on the skills piece, though, it's also even when we think of taking what are waste streams and creating new products, it's often a whole new system.
Absolutely,
a new technology that's being treated. I'm just thinking of one place that I visited in the Netherlands where it was a waste treatment depot where households could come and take different types of waste, including organic forms, but then they also had these studios for entrepreneurs that would take specific things. So there was someone who took citrus peels and rose petals and rose components and then made different products like perfumes, etc. And I imagine that's not following the more conventional ways of producing those types of products.
Well, yeah, there was a lovely comment that stuck in my mind. It was after one of our sort of learning events, which was sort of a lot of young designers who joined for that. And I overheard one of them saying, as they were leaving the auditorium, "Now I know about the circular economy, I want to redesign the world." And actually, there is, at the heart of the circular economy, there's this potential for, it's like a wellspring of innovation. If you start reimagining waste as actually feedstock, then there's all these kind of innovatives and entrepreneurial things you can do.
And when it comes to food, there are so many great projects and much needed efforts that we've started to come across for like training the next generation of farmers.
Yeah.
Right. And regenerative farmers, and how can we embed those technical skills from the outset. And a couple places like Stone Barns Center and Pie Ranch out in the US that are helping young people who are teenagers first visit the farms, understand where their food's coming from, what do regenerative practices look like, and then actually creating apprenticeship models and so that they can potentially one day, if they want to, have their own plot of land and be producing. But that's something that sometimes is overlooked, is the skills shift in food, which comes in many different dimensions, including the production of food and the transformation of what otherwise would be waste. And
I don't know if Jimmy O'Mal is still on the line. He's talked about, it's so great for the resilience of a new Gulu city in Uganda. I was actually in Uganda at Gulu a few years back, so I know it well. We were designing a fish hatchery there. But I've recently spoken, because Gulu is known for its mangoes. And who's the organisation we're talking to?
AgriCycle?
Yeah, they send. Yeah. So yeah, I believe AgriCycle, which is one of the is in our network, and they're all about valor, or taking a situation where there's a sort of surplus of mangoes or fruits, whatever, and then preserving it in some way, either drying it or pickling it, and then creating a really, really sort of valuable product. And I believe they are active or plan to be active in Gulu. We talked about that very city a few weeks back. So look out for them, Jimmy. How are we doing for time? I think we've got time for one more question before we hand back to
yeah, I'm
Paul.
just seeing, let's see. We've covered lots of these.
Well, should we wrap up, because we've got a couple of minutes?
Yeah, why don't we start wrapping up? If there are any last minute questions that come to mind, do keep sharing them.
Yeah. Shall I wrap up?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So thank you so much for joining us today. This is a picture from Ethiopia. I don't know, is anyone from Ethiopia on the line? This is what Ethiopian people eat on Wednesdays and Friday when they fast. It's called bayonet. And I love this image. And every time I used to eat this dish, I was just inspired and blown away by the sort of diversity of food in Africa. And diversity is a really, really key part of the circular economy, diversity to build resilience. And we had, I don't know if Mokadi on the line today, McCarty. She was the chef from Joburg that she was sort of contributed to our big food workshop, and she said, you know, how much you can, you know, learn from your grandma, and, you know, we shouldn't dismiss traditional knowledge, and there's so much traditional knowledge in Africa, and that's a real asset. So I just want to leave on that positive image and that positive note. Do you have anything else to say, Emma, or should we say goodbye?
I think if there's no other questions.
Yeah. Okay.
We've done a lot of talking.
We've done a lot of talking.
So I hope what was shared was helpful for you. I hope perhaps it's inspired you to check out some of these examples. We will do our best to work with the broader production team to make sure that we share the links and things so that you can check them out. And do click through that red pen link that was shared in the chat and weigh in on that cities tool. We'd love to hear your feedback and would love to be able to share the final tool when we release it in the following months.
Okay, thank you. So we'll hand back to Paul and the team at ICLEI. All right, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much, Nick and Emma. And thanks to the participants for voicing really direct and engaging questions. I think from our perspective, this is the beginning of a number of processes related to food systems and circularity. So we do look forward to seeing this evolve. For any of the questions about the resources, I think there are enough resources to explore for a few hours further. So we'll share all of these in the emails that follow, the presentations and recordings, as well as the links to the resources. So again, a big thank you to Ellen MacArthur Foundation. It's been wonderful to get inspiration on some of our work and to contribute to these processes. Just to close off today with a number of other upcoming events related to African City Food Month and Rise Africa, you'll have noticed behind. The Cape Town Food Dialogues have started teasing a number of videos and inputs. So I do recommend shifting over to their site and seeing which provocations you'd like to participate in. It's based in Cape Town, but given the nature of our world at the moment, it has continental reach, and our partners would very much like to hear your interactions. And they're trying a very novel approach of provocations and then some online commenting and engagement before they wrap up with further insights from the panelists. The next events are related to African City Food Month. So next week, we'll be focusing on youth and women-led small businesses and how they can improve local food systems. That's on Wednesday, the 29th of July, same time. And then to close the reflections of African City Food Month, we have a future-oriented reflection on the future of our food systems. So please do join us for that on the 31st of July. Next one, please, Ryan. Tomorrow, on a similar theme, is agribusiness incubation in sub-Saharan Africa. And this is hosted by our colleagues with FAO, with a speaker, Dr. Anne Roulon from Agripreneurship Alliance, and a number of really interesting speakers. So we've shared the links into our chat here. Please do join them tomorrow, same time, 2 to 4 o'clock. After that, as part of Rise Africa, which is trying to think of new ways to approach the future of African cities, we have a reflection of the importance of gender equity in a time of crisis. How do we move from theory to action? So please do join. That is next Tuesday. And we'll take some of the ideas of Rise Africa forward. And our final promo, if you've remembered all of these, is on August 4th, localizing the Sustainable Development Goals. So what lessons can we derive from South Africa? And this is a 2-part series with a follow-up to broaden this to other African cities. So again, thank you so much for your attention, for your participation. We'll follow up with further resources and the links to a number of the things I've shared now by email. And we wish you a pleasant day further. Stay well.